there's been a lot of families that have impacted my life. You know, I know it's like we're supposed to be impacting their lives, but I feel very fortunate that I've been allowed to be in their homes, because I'm a stranger, and families all over the county has allowed me into their homes to be part of their life or their journey of parenting, and it's been huge. I really feel like I'm very grateful for that.
Hello everybody. Today we're going to talk about the Franklin County Children's Task Force, and I have some special guests here, and one person who looped me in years ago, over 20 years ago, into being a supporter in whole heart for this project. So you are?
Riley Blanchette.
Riley, are you related to that Renee lady?
I sure am.
Oh,
yes.
Oh, no, I should. And you are?
I'm Deb McGrane, and I am a team leader, home visitor.
Leader and home visit. Thank you, Deb. Thanks for coming, and thanks for all the work you do.
Thanks.
So, Deb, tell me how you got, before we go into some of the other things we want to bring up and how you roped me in, tell us how you got interested in this and what brought you to the Children's Task Force.
Well, actually, many years ago, I was a board member, like back in the 80s, and I worked during that time. I was at Swetwinter Childcare, so I've always worked with families. Prior to that, I was like a nursery school teacher, and this job happened to come up. It was part-time, and so I decided that maybe it was time for a change, so I applied for it, and I got the position. I worked 32 hours, and in fact, Renee was my home visitor that I shadowed, and so everything is history. 20 years later, I'm still here.
Wow.
Yeah.
20 years later.
I love working with families and children, and I think that's just was really a big strength for me, and it just seemed like it was a good fit.
So your coverage area was huge, though, right? Franklin County. So you would, I mean, you and I went out. We went up to Phillips and Strong, and we're in Wilton. Do you have all of Franklin County, or just parts of it?
Well, I mean, because there's other home visitors that have different areas, but right now I go all the way up to Stratton and Eustis.
Wow.
For families that I've been serving for a few years. So
how does a family come to you and say that you would be like to be visited?
Well, what we do is we actually get referrals from, usually it's the women's care, and then we contacted the families themselves, because they've given us permission to contact them. We ask them if they are interested, and if they are, then we assign them to a home visitor, and whoever has availability, usually that's what we do. And then we make that official call and say, hey, my name is Debbie McGrane, are you interested in the home program? And usually we set up a time when they can actually meet, the day that works for them and a time that works for them. This program really is about what the families are needing and not what we need. So if they say, oh, I can't really meet you until 5 o'clock, then we make our arrangement to do that for families. So, and it is free, and it is for all families in Franklin County. It's just not for specific families. It's for all. We offer it to everyone.
Everybody, no matter what income or
right.
So walk me through, I mean, I've been there with you, but walk through a typical, you've come into my house, and for the first time we've met, and then as we go through that, what would be the process, or what would it look like with the family? So some of the assessments you do, some of the information you gather.
Right. Well, I mean, it really will look different for all families, because it's really, you kind of go with what they're needing. But, I mean, my initial visit will definitely be building relationships with that family. There's certainly paperwork that has to be done. We talk about development of the child, what they see, what's happening. Like, so tell me, what's your little one been doing since the last visit, or since our first visit. And then we might have an ASQ, which is an Ages Stages questionnaire to do. But again, it depends on, like if I have a prenatal family, it's certainly not going to be talking about ages and stages. We're going to talk about prenatal stuff.
So you do this prenatal now too? Yeah.
Yes, we do prenatal information. And so what we would do is say, so how's your visits been? Have you been going to the doctors? And kind of look at where they are with the pregnancy. So if they're 13 weeks, let's look at what's happening with your baby. Some fears that they might have, some challenges they might be having for their pregnancy, encouraging them to make sure to reach out to their doctors. Again, it's going to look different for each family that we go into. So I couldn't really tell you specifically what we do every visit with everybody. So I may go to the next visit, I might have a 2.5-year-old. So we're going to, do some activities, and we're going to talk about what's happening. Usually that's a time when child development is happening with, I can't think, temperament,
Yeah.
discipline. This is a time discipline that actually happens. They're like, well, or he's not sleeping, or whatever. So we do a lot of talking about that as well. So,
and I recall when you went into the one home, you actually did like little mini developmental tests for the child, so you knew how old they were. And like one of the places I remember, they had to play the musical triangle that I grew up with in kindergarten. You probably didn't, but I did. And I remember you going through that and then assessing to the parents that what you observed.
Yes. Well, again, those are what they call ages and stages questionnaires, and they're specifically to different areas of development, like to communication, fine motors, gross motors, the personal social development, and also the cognitive. So it's like you can look at that with the parent and say, look, he did really, really well. Let's practice on doing some more language stuff. So that's how we would make the next plan and, give them some information on language development or have an activity that might promote that for that child.
Now, if you come in and you find that like my language development is not progressing, do you advise them as to what they might want to look into?
Absolutely. We usually talk to them about maybe talking to their doctor. And of course, Child Development Services is available for all families, so we could encourage them to contact them, or we would help them contact them, because it's a free service as well, and they can come in and they can check it out to see where, if they do need services for their language development. So anything, either that or gross motor or, PT, OT, whatever the family's seeing for themselves. And really like to hear from the family what they're feeling too. Whether the ASQs are saying, oh, well, don't worry about it right now. But if the families are feeling like, I'm really concerned about the language development, that's when we would go and say, well, here, call CDS. It doesn't hurt to help, to have them come in and just assess them. So just kind of reinforcing for families.
So if a family wanted to be involved that's watching this, what number do they dial?
They could call 207
207
778
778
6960.
6960.
Yep. We also have a referral form on our website that families can self-refer for the program.
And that website, do you remember it?
Yep, www.fcctf.org.
Okay, so say it again slow so I can point it out as it's running.
www.fcctf.org.
And so there's an application that one can fill out online, or they can call the phone number and we'll put it up again at the end so that people know that. So Deb, your first interaction with FCCTF as a board member, right?
Yes.
So what did you find as a board member when you were involved at that time?
Well, I did a lot of events with them, and actually the festival was my baby. It was like
the Children's Festival. Ah.
Yeah, I ran that for many, many years. So it was like me and another lady would take on the responsibility and make sure it was running, and that's when it was here at the UMF. I probably did it several years ago, back in the 80s, I think. I think I've got a picture of me in a clown suit and all that. It was huge. And I don't know if you recall when the task force actually did the Fresh Air program that brought in inner city children.
I do remember that, yes.
Yeah, I actually served on that for a few years too. I would go in and interview families, fill out the applications. I actually hosted a child from inner city, and I would actually be somebody that would go back on the bus with them. So yeah, I was very involved with that for the longest time.
So, and we just talked about the Children's Festival. What came up, how did you come up with the idea?
I think it was actually there already, and I just, I wasn't, it was the board before me. Actually, I think Colin Durrell was also on the board with me when I was there. He's still on our board. He's still on the board. I think it was already in place. There was other people that had taken it over, and then once I got involved with the board, I said, this might really interest me a lot. So me and another lady, we would have meetings, and we would reach out to everybody, and we would get it all together, and we would have a committee off-site And so I really loved it. I love being part of that whole excitement of seeing the kids' faces and the balloons. There'd be balloons everywhere.
Yeah.
So it was just something that I had passion about.
The two things, or it's more than two things, but I remember and I think you probably don't know, they still come, is the maple syrup guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
They'd be out making maple syrup candy with snow.
That is so good.
That's so good.
So
and I
good.
always somehow wandered out there to see them, to visit them.
Somehow.
Well, I remember I was getting into my truck going over to get pizza.
That's right.
So I'd come back and I just have to stop and make
Right.
sure the quality control
Of
was there.
course.
And then I remember Mr. McGruff, Carol Condit, who
Yes.
did that for years.
Yep.
Yes, he did.
He was, and I actually, when I see Carol, I sort of call him Mr. McGruff, or I ask his wife, how's Mr. McGruff doing?
Yeah.
And then, the magician, I remember the magician coming there and the music you had. And I remember your mother saying to me, she wanted me to announce things. Nobody was paying attention to
Nobody
me. They were out doing their own thing. So, but I remember the North Dining Hall was full.
Yes.
You know, either face painting or something going on, kids' activities that they could be involved in, engaged in.
And I think it's huge because all other agencies come in, so we're collaborating with them too. So, like we had, I was trying to think, the 4-H would be there. That way kids would get to know what the 4-H was about. The police or the fire department or different agencies that would come, HCC now. I think there's a lot of agencies that will come and support this festival. Without them, it wouldn't be much of a festival.
And I remember the fire department, I think, brought in a uniform kids could try on if
Oh,
they
yeah.
wanted to.
Yeah,
That's
so,
a hit.
Anyway,
And
Yeah,
it's
they
an
love that.
ideal time because it's, that's kind of like in the middle of winter, you really can't do anything outside unless you're really into skiing or snowshoeing
Right,
or whatever. And sometimes
right.
we don't have snow, it's just cold out.
Yeah.
So it's a great activity.
Yeah.
Wow. So tell me about the nurturing program.
okay, so when I first started with the
They're going to be impossible to replace you.
No.
now.
When I
can't.
first started with the agency back in 2004, Renee was doing what they call the nurturing program, which was parents and children, and I would be the provider for the children while the parents were in the classes, and we would be kind of doing the same sort of activities or whatever with the parents, and then we would come together for a meal, and then we would go back to a room. So I watched the children while the parents were there. So I did that for a few years until, it was like it ran for like 20 weeks. It was a lengthy.
And that was my first interaction working with Debbie. I did childcare at that.
Oh, you were the child care, so you just
We did both.
took
Yeah.
care of them to get in line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how many families participate in that now?
I don't know because I'm so far removed, but when we
still
did
do
do
the
it,
nurturing.
we still do nurturing, but it looks totally different than it used to because of the COVID, and it's really done something different. So there's a lot of online classes now.
Yep.
So, but the nurturing, I think that ended up probably, maybe 10 or so families when we were doing
Yeah.
it.
You thought, as we came in here, 21 years, and the thing that's interesting is that you and I met just as you were coming on.
Yes, we did.
Because, and the story you visited, you thought about over that 21 years that you've been doing this, about 300 families.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I bet you got some stories to tell
I
about that.
do, and it's like my family's. It's been really hard because I am getting ready to retire on Friday, so it's been saying goodbye to some of the families that I've had, and it's been the most rewarding job I'd ever had. It's really hard it's been hard for me to make that decision to retire, but I know it's time. But there's been a lot of families that have impacted my life. I know it's like we're supposed to be impacting their lives, but I feel very fortunate that I've been allowed to be in their homes because I'm a stranger, and families all over the county has allowed me into their homes to be part of their life or their journey of parenting, and it's been huge. I really feel like I'm very grateful for that. And I always say that to families because I think that's an important piece. Because, if somebody had called me and said, hey, I'm so-and-so from Maine Families, can I come and visit you in your home?
Yeah, right.
I'm not really sure, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a stranger. So I really feel fortunate that that's happened for me over the years, that I've been able to do this. So,
And I've shared this story when we did it before, but her mother trying to, as a legislator, explain to me the program.
Yeah.
I said, can I go on a field trip? And she said she would check, and you had must have just come on. It was in the wintertime, I remember that. It was maybe spring. And I came, and we went to the first house, was in Wilton, and there was a young mom, 17 years old, had a little baby, and sadly the parents had abandoned her, but she had contact with her grandfather. And we went in, and the baby was sleeping. Oh my, it's just so vivid to me. Baby was sleeping, and you're doing your interview, and I'm sitting on the floor as you were, because you came to their space and what they were comfortable in, and we're having the conversation about development. All of a sudden, the baby cries. So she gets in and gets the baby and puts it on the floor, and the thing proceeds to crawl all over me, kiss me, hug me, and I was toast at that point. But I clearly could see why this person needed your support. Not help, support, because she was trying to do the job as a mom. But she was 17, so she was kind of lost at it. And you were giving her the guidance, and if I remember correctly, the grandfather was there. So, but that's hooked me, and then after that, I was toast. So I was Renee's major advocate. I went and yelled and screamed in the legislature and talked about what they do. And I encourage my fellow legislators to see it firsthand so they understand it.
Yeah.
But 300 families.
Yeah, at least. I mean, I probably have had more, but I don't know. But, and I think about this too, is like when I go in to see families, I don't go in as the expert. I go in as them being the expert. All families really want to do their best they can. And that's really our philosophy. Yeah. And I really feel that all parents are the expert. I always say that to them, look, you're the expert, I'm not. You're with that child 24/7. And if you have some issues or you're feeling something is not right, you need to be able to reach out to the doctors or whatever you need to do. But I think the respect I have for families was huge. Because I wasn't in there to tell them how to raise their child. That's not what we do.
That's what I remember too, is you were asking them questions, and if they asked you back, you would give them, well, here's some things you might try. I can remember, again, you'd laugh, but I remember, that's a trip, Deb, that will be in my memory banks as long as I can still remember.
Well, that's great.
That's not very long, though. But no, really, I do. I talk about it all the time because it was such a wonderful experience for me to go through. Having grown up in a family that grandma lived down the street, so grandma was always around, and mom was around little kids when she was growing up, so she didn't have the support staff. But I can see where people that are like that young lady need somebody to come in and be a stabilizing influence on them.
Right. And I think it's also important for people that don't have those support systems is to be able to connect them to the community with some events that's happening, or we have playgroups that happen. So it's really important, so that way they get to know moms, or use of the library, or just to give them some other resources so they can have that connection with other people, because that's huge too.
Huge.
Yeah.
You have no passion for this job.
No, not at all.
So where do you get your passion? I mean,
I think my passion comes from within. I mean, I have my own family, and I did childcare. I mean, I did the Sweat Winter, and I did the David Staples place, nursery school. Wow. That's how I started. And I know the struggles that families can go through. And so I think it's just a passion of mine just because it's within. And honestly, when I was a little girl, I remember saying to my mom, I would love to have a big mansion, and I would love to adopt all the children in the world that nobody wanted. And I remember that. So I've always had that passion for families and children. So
you still have that
I
mansion.
still have
You have the mansion. You have the mansion. It just happens to be Franklin County and not just one house and two houses.
I do remember that, though. That's all ever I wanted.
Wow.
Yeah.
Deb, is there anything you'd like to add, or did you like to add?
No.
I think
I'm going to miss everybody.
Well, you're going to be missed. For sure.
Yeah, she's just incredible.
You are incredible.
We're so lucky.
Thanks.
Yeah, you are. I want to thank you. Again, Franklin Children's Task Force, you guys have made a huge difference in this community. You know that I'm a strong believer of it. And it's because of people like you, they've been successful in helping families and protecting families and so forth. So I want to thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
For having
and let me tell you, retirement is pretty good.
Is it?
Yeah, it's really good.
Okay,
You just have to get used to it.
That's the thing. That's why I'm coming back to work a little bit.
I wish you the best of
Well,
luck.
thank
and
you
best of
so
time.
much. Thank you for having me.
It's funny, if I ask my pre-K daughter, what do I do for work? She says, well, you play with babies and you help parents be the best parents they can be.
Maine Families is a home visiting program where we work with prenatal families and families who have babies. We support them in their baby's development and serve as a partner and a source of information for new parents.
I don't know if there is a typical day. I get to sit with so many different ways of life.
I support families in so many different ways. I learn about my own parenting. I watch them grow.
I love visiting families. I love to be loud with the kids and be silly.
When we support parents, we are supporting our children, and that expands into our community.
Maine Families is the coolest program. You really get to know people like deep down and personal, and it is an awesome job.